Two editions of this document were built in parallel, and both used the numbers 1.6 and 1.7 for different amendments. Both issued a defense count 13 and both issued a defense count 14 with different content. Neither branch is wrong. Neither supersedes the other. They are merged here, and version 2.0 is the only current text. The instrument's branch is renumbered. Its crown counts become 7, 8, and 9. Its defense counts become 30, 1 through 34. The affirmative branch keeps every label it had, because that numbering is the one that reached the narrated film. Nothing has been dropped to make the merge tidy.
And the court records the collision rather than quietly picking a winner. A document that cannot say which of two texts is current is in the same condition as the records it has been grading. Trial 1 turns on a missing crosswalk. Trial 2 turns on a missing authorization. A parallel branch collision is the same failure in miniature.
Fix! The K-Year 1867 ranked iconographic register. The Palm and Pine Addendum. The DeSoto Report, sections 10 to 12 only. The Clinker Narration. The court-oriented pro-authenticity inventory. And a composite plate of which one panel only is received.
The DeSoto counterfactual criminal analysis is excluded, and excluded without criticism. A charge matrix against Hernando de Soto has no bearing on whether Osborne sold genuine antiquities to Valentine in 1880, and admitting it would invite this court to reason from atrocity to authenticity. The bug effigy panel is received, the rest is not. The plate headers Hopewell material as 900 AD Mississippian. The commercial silkworm and the white mulberry are Old World introductions with a colonial sericulture explanation in America, and North America has its own large native silk moths. The plate identifies the species from a photograph, which cannot be done, and it asks whether ancient visitors introduced white mulberry to the Mississippi Valley, which is a transoceanic contact frame. This corpus already carries a diffusionist association it did not ask for. Attaching a live one to it would cost the defense more than the cocoons could ever return. 8 objections, 6 from the OE record and 2 new. And the court notes before it begins that 2 of the 3 corrections in this edition run against the party that pleaded the point. That the Kahir count was framed as a copying allegation when no evidence places Kahir within the knowledge of any party, and that Kahir compelled from European sources rather than originating them. Sustained, in both branches. Kahir was a Jesuit archaeologist and iconographer, and his volume is a finding aid. It indexes attributes as they already appeared across European popular art, in sculpture, glass, seals, prints, and ex-votos. It is downstream of the vocabulary, not upstream of it. So the 1867 publication date was never the relevant date. A compilation dates the indexing, not the vocabulary. That the defense pleading imports an ungraded adverse premise by describing its own witness as the excavator of the Back Creek stone. Disdain. That clause carried no finding. It worked by inviting the reader to supply a premise this court has never ruled on and the defense has never asserted. It is struck. Accession V 75.01 comprises carved steatite and clay objects collected in Haywood County between 1879 and 1882, but the number of objects as stated in this document has roughly 600 in the framing and as roughly 1,500 in the defense economics count. Those cannot both be right. The court does not resolve it here and records it as a live defect rather than a verification item because the economics count divides by that number.
The operation described in scale and investigated as real. The planting allegation, the 2 dated objects, the withheld data, and the camel, all carried and changed. The Crown withdraws the copying allegation. It does not allege that Kahir was the source, that any party owned or saw a copy, or that any object was made from a plate. No copy in Haywood County. No book plate. No shipping record. No library accession. No witness. And the court draws no adverse inference from the withdrawal. What survives is the whole of the count. The symbolic vocabulary was in circulation and had been for centuries. The defense has argued that a fabricator does not produce a coherent symbolic grammar that would not be assembled and tested for another 140 years. That argument assumed the grammar had to be invented. The grammar was never unassembled. It removes a defense argument. It supplies no affirmative evidence that any object is modern, and on the Crown's own case it is the weakest of its three new counts. Catalog at mound number 1, 4 nails, 2 historic sherds, 2 bullets, a cast bronze bell, a charred peach stone, the plinker, a musket ball, a lead bullet, a lead ball, and a rifled 12-gauge slug. Prunus persica is a European introduction. A charred peach stone cannot belong to a phase that ended around 1450. A rifled 12-gauge slug is 20th century. The Crown does not say this proves fabrication. It says something narrower and harder to escape. No mound number 1 context on this record can be described as sealed, and the defense's own instrument concedes it, in both directions. Ledger number 28 has carried this issue alone since 1882. Beside it now stand a mounted horseman, a woman riding side saddle, a crown, a cephalophore, and a lamb of the resurrection. A misidentification defense works on a single ambiguous quadruped. It does not work on a class, and no New World animal explains a woman seated sideways on a mount. And the Crown concedes the point is not new. Keane, examining the corpus in London in 1882, already separated horse and rider, firearm and shoe as plainly recent from an older-looking carved core. The Crown's count 9 and the defense's count 25 are the same observation, made by the same man, in the same year. The court records the convergence, and the Crown concedes the class is post-contact rather than necessarily modern. The horse arrives in the 16th century, not the 19th.
Having narrowed the Crown's count, the court enters the same finding against the defense before the defense relies on it, because the two errors are one error. It is urged that because Cahir compiled from European sources, the objects are proven authentic matches rather than copies. That does not follow. The move that dissolves Cahir as a source dissolves it as a dating instrument. A vocabulary broad enough that a Jesuit could index it from folk art across a continent was also in general circulation in 1880. Illustrated family Bibles and their plate lists, Sunday school papers, fraternal emblems, gravestone carving, cheap engravings sold by peddler and by post. Availability in 1650 does not exclude availability in 1880. It tends to imply it, because print made the vocabulary cheaper over time, not scarcer. The Crown loses the pattern source reading as an affirmative case. The defense loses the authentic match reading as a general inference, and it is recorded as advanced and withdrawn. Neither loss is a finding about the objects. Both are findings about what this class of evidence can carry.
The defense withdraws all reliance on the clinker's phase and is stronger for the withdrawal. Rosette requires roughly 400 to 500 degrees Celsius. Talc to instadide conversion requires roughly 800 to 900. Cement-type clinker requires roughly 1200 to 1450. A burning building reaches the first without difficulty. The defense needs only that the site burned, which Valentine documented in August 1880, 3 years before the allegation, and Hay corroborated in 1915. What remains after the strike is sufficient and independent. The certified copy alteration proven in Emmert's own hand is procurement of fabricated comparison specimens documented in his own letters. Informants supplied on the understanding their names would never be used. The count loses nothing. And the struck clause fought the defense's own case. Count 12 argues that Emmert bought authentic material and the manufacturing account was constructed around the purchase. A pleading cannot simultaneously run that theory and imply its witness plants finds. The inconsistency is resolved in favor of count 12.
The court makes no finding on the Back Creek stone and will not. It is a different corpus, a different site, and an unresolved object-level question of exactly the kind this court holds must be resolved object by object rather than by general verdict. It is entered because of its structure, same agent, same institution, contested at object level, a general verdict entered once and later reversed, and a contemporaneous voucher listing an engraved stone among copper bracelets, jaw bones, and a bone instrument, the same documentary form as the 1883 ethnologic specimens language. Thomas, in 1894, publish the Back Creek inscription and read it as characters of the Cherokee syllabary, using it to support his own hypothesis about Cherokee mound building. The same report, the same author, the same institution, and the same year classified the Valentine objects as bogus articles. Thomas authenticated one Emmet-associated body of material and condemned another in one volume. The later literature has reversed him on both.
Landscape, testimony, and architecture. Stream control. The recovery context. The economics. The dispersed file. The withdrawals. Heterogeneity. And the rainmaking attribution stated at its real grade. All carried entire, and all unrenumbered.
Count 14 identifies the source of the December 1880 letter as a Cherokee principal chief, Dennis W. Bushyhead, in office from 1879 to 1887. Count 28 of the same document, and the inventory behind it, describe him instead as a Macon County Cherokee man. Dennis Wolf Bushyhead was principal chief of the Cherokee Nation after removal, resident at Tahlequah in Indian Territory across the whole of that term. He is not available as a Macon County informant in December 1880. The identification is struck, and the count is more coherent without it. A Western North Carolina Cherokee man's contemporaneous statement about a Western North Carolina practice is better evidence for that practice than a chief in Indian Territory would be. This was the single most load-bearing affirmative item in the defense case. Its weight is unchanged by the strike.
Rao, in 1882, alleged no fraud, no commerce, and no forgers. He proposed post-Columbian manufacture by a few individuals, possibly Indian, and named Indian makers as his first possibility. A post-contact native carver in a Christianized landscape does not need kahir. He needs a devotional print, a medal, a crucifix, a chapel carving, a catechist, or a priest. And the defense says one thing against its own convenience if the register is right. This is not a pre-contact shrine assemblage, and the defense does not ask this court to find that it is. Class A, non-diagnostic, the lamb, the crown, the five-pointed star, the hand, the serpent, the tree, the horse and rider, ei. All in general American Protestant circulation by 1880. The defense does not press them, and that concession costs it most of the register. Class B, discriminating, the cephalopher above all, the four evangelists as a complete named tetramorph, the side subtle figure read as an attribute, the altar contact composition. A cephalophore is a saint cult form. It requires the story to be intelligible, and it does not travel on a Sunday school page. The availability survey has not been run, and the defense flags that against itself. The 1883 subagent invoice openly lists one imitation bug, separately priced and invoiced at 25 cents. The Crown has used that line as proof the collecting stream produced fabrications. The defense uses the same line for the opposite purpose and asks a narrower question. Was the collector right that it was an imitation? An anthropomorphic bug effigy is exhibited as a cast at the Cahokia Mounds Interpretive Center under that institutional label. A state historic site putting a cast in a case under a named artifact label is a curating institution accepting the original as a genuine artifact of a recognized form. The defense pleads it at the only grade it will carry. Typological implausibility is not available as a ground of rejection. That is a negative finding, and the defense asks for nothing more. Collectors unfamiliar with archaeological terminology called objects scraps, weights, and imitations. The banner letters documented in terms, Everett stating he was not acquainted with their names, and Valentine comparing perforated objects to spindle whorls. A genuine bannerstone, atlatl weight or gorget could be invoiced as an imitation by a man who did not know what he was holding. An institutional label is a classification, not a material science determination.
The court has not been given the effigy's repository, accession number, site of origin, or the identity of the original from which the cast was taken. A display location is not a find spot. Interpretive centers exhibit casts precisely because the original is elsewhere, and the same rule applies that narrowed the Crown's Count 7. A documented and exhibited type is easier to copy convincingly, not harder. Type existence defeats implausibility. It authenticates nothing. The defense had abandoned the comparator tier entire. That was an overcorrection. Iroquois and effigy pipe traditions, and the large steatite pipe from a documented Hopewell context at SAPE defeat the proposition that carved human and animal imagery in stone is inherently non-native. They defeat impossibility. They prove no identity, and they are not offered as proof of any. To the defense, Count 9 argued a coherent local tradition inside a southeastern symbolic world. Count 31 argues a post-contact carver reproducing Christian iconography. Which does the defense run? Answer. The defense elects Count 31 and withdraws the implication in Count 9 that the system is pre-contact. Count 9 survives as evidence that the corpus is organized. It no longer survives as evidence of antiquity. To the defense, if a documented and exhibited type exists, does that make a convincing fabrication easier or harder? Answer. Alia, a forger copies what is known, not what is obscure. The defense concedes the count cuts partly against it and pleads it anyway, because it defeats a ground of rejection the Crown has been permitted to use without proof. Count 7, proven that the vocabulary existed, negative only. Count 8, proven that the deposit is mixed, adverse to both parties. Count 9, proven as a class, not proven as modern. Chronological diagnosis, not supported in either direction. Count 31, supported, and the best evidenced reading of the corpus's subject matter. Count 32, not graded, pending the survey. Count 33, supported that classification error runs both ways on the banned letters alone, and not graded as to the effigy. Judgment for neither party. The prosecution has not proven the corpus mater made. The defense has not proven any individual object ancient. Both failures are structural, and they have the same cause. The object-level crosswalk does not exist. But the axis has moved. On the evidence now in the record, the pre-contact reading is the weakest of the three available readings, and the live contest is between post-contact native manufacture and 19th century manufacture for sale. And for the first time the parties agree on the test. Both have withdrawn the reading each preferred. What is left standing on both sides is one question: what was obtainable in that valley, and when? It is answerable from ordinary 19th century sources rather than from a laboratory. That is not a verdict. It is the first convergence in this trial. The Availability Survey. The Object Level Concordance for Ranks 1 to 17. The Class A and Class B assignment made falsifiable object by object. The repository, accession, and site of origin of the bug effigy. The cephala for object photograph to standard ahead of the queue. Chemistry on the 5 adjacent ash lots before chemistry on the clinker. And the corpus-sized contradiction closed before any external filing. Nothing entered in the reconciliation touches the Monk's Mound record. The instruments are iconographic, or they concern catalog records at Garden Creek. Every pleading and every grade stands as entered. The intervention was justified. The emergency was not. No instrument clears the work as executed. Destruction is not proven as to the monument, and the controlling finding stands. The decisive act of 2007 was not the excavation. It was the decision not to screen the stockpile.
16 entries, 6 resolved, 10 open, and the runtime first. The version 1.8 cover states 4 to 5 minutes and 43 seconds. The version 1.8 timecode sheet states 1 hour, 16 minutes and 12 seconds. The file measures 4,512 seconds, 1 hour, 15 minutes and 12 seconds. Both stated figures are wrong, and the 4 to 543 figure has now survived 3 editions uncorrected. The corpus size contradicts itself inside one document, 600 in the framing, 1500 in the economics count. The bushy head identification is wrong. The version record was corrupted by a global find and replaced that caught the record and missed the body. And the missing lift defect is still present 2 editions after it was diagnosed. 3 of those 4 are defects in this document, not in its sources, and the court records its own before it records anyone else's. In each, the decisive document does not exist. In each, the party best placed to resolve the question declined to produce the instrument that would. In each, a general verdict has already been entered once and did damage. In each, what was lost was context rather than material. In each, new evidence has narrowed the case rather than won it. And in each, the court has had to correct itself against a party. The heavy plant inference was overruled although it favored the Crown. The Cahier framing was narrowed although it favored the Crown. The Bat Creek clause was struck although it favored the defense. A tribunal that only corrects in one direction is not grading either.